Thank you, Mr. Chope. And I congratulate the honourable gentleman for securing this debate on such an important issue and one that is very close to my heart personally. And I hope that honourable members will forgive me if I start by just speak about myself a little. In January 2017, after the Christmas break, I came back to Parliament, like many colleagues did, with a bit of a cold. And of course, you carry on working. After all, it's just a cold. The weeks went by and it was getting a bit worse. Course of antibiotics. I suspect, like the honourable gentleman, a 7-day course of antibiotics very rarely clears up an infection for a gentleman of my physique. And so within a short period, the infection was starting to come back and had sore throat. But nevertheless, it's only a sore throat. So I went out to Strasbourg for the Parliamentary Assembly Council Europe meeting that week, and whilst there, it deteriorated. I was feeling really, really grotty on the Tuesday morning, so I just stayed in my hotel room. Wednesday, so bad, I sent someone to do me a favour and go to a chemist. And by Thursday, things had got so terrible that I booked an appointment with a GP in Strasbourg, which was a typical man. I mean, this was very much at a last resort. And the GP did the normal checks, blood pressure and the like, and gave me a throat spray. Anyway, I was feeling pretty awful, so flew back that evening, struggled through constituency events on Friday. By Saturday morning, I was getting up, putting my suit on top of my pyjamas, told my wife I had to come down to Westminster to vote. She recognised this wasn't entirely typical behaviour and phoned for an ambulance. Within a few hours, I was in an induced coma. I remained in a coma for the next 11 days after a septic shock, where the consultants told my family I had about a 10% chance of surviving, and if I was to pull through, it would almost certainly be with life-changing effects, whether amputations, whether brain damage, or other severe effects. Fortunately, of course, I was extremely and unbelievably lucky. I was lucky largely, of course, because of the amazing care that I received from Russell's Hall Hospital in Dudley and the staff there. But above all, I was lucky that on that Saturday morning, as we presented to A&E, the nurse who's just walking past happened to recognise that these symptoms that look much like any number of other conditions, particularly often meningitis with rash, that actually they needed to check, could it be sepsis? Because sepsis is a life-threatening condition. It's a response to infection that can lead to tissue damage, organ failure and death if not treated promptly. But still, despite the severity and the number of deaths and the many, many other people who were left with their lives fundamentally changed by sepsis, very few people would be able to spot the signs, and of course that delays diagnosis and treatment. Even the GP, the GP in France, who I'm sure was extremely well qualified and professional physician, didn't spot that this could be sepsis. And that lack of awareness contributes to the staggering statistics that the honourable gentleman went through, with around probably 48,000 deaths a year in the United Kingdom due to sepsis. That means that in this 60-minute debate, the chances are 5 more people will have lost their life to sepsis by the end of it. A further 25 will have had their lives changed by sepsis. And globally, it affects around 49 million people across the globe, with probably about 11 million losing their lives each year. And there's a growing body of opinion that thinks that believes that actually probably the majority of COVID deaths were actually COVID deaths with the infection triggering that septic response. I keep on saying probably because, frightening as these figures are, they are best guesses. We don't know because actually the reporting, although in the United Kingdom the reporting is better than in almost any other country, it is still not consistent. It is still quite possible that it will just be recorded as a multiple organ failure or respiratory failure, despite there being a case of sepsis or a septic shock. And so it is so important if we are to step up to the challenge of reducing those deaths, which, as was being said, does represent more than the lives lost to breast, bowel and prostate cancers combined every single year. We need that sepsis register so that we know how many cases, that we can then see how those cases progress. Because one of the most alarming aspects of sepsis is that it does often go unrecognised until it's too late. I was lucky that it was spotted as I presented at A&E, because even 2 or 3 hours longer might have been 2 or 3 hours that made the difference between that 10% chance of survival and something quite minuscule. Our friend and former colleague, Lord McKinley, was similarly fortunate that although his condition had deteriorated at an astonishingly rapid rate, it was just caught in time for him to be able to survive. That early identification and diagnosis is important because in most cases, timely antibiotics, a broad-based antibiotic, intravenous antibiotics, will usually be enough to stop the infection from triggering that septic responses. And so promoting Sepsis Awareness Month isn't just about sharing statistics or stories, it's about saving lives. By educating the public and healthcare professionals about the signs and the symptoms of sepsis, we can ensure that more people receive the urgent care that they need. And the Sepsis Trust, which do so much amazing work in the UK, led by the incredible Dr. Ron Daniels, have a 3-point plan that I think we all need to get behind. We need to be able to measure and publish performance data on sepsis care pathways so that we can see how these are responded to, that we can measure both the success and obviously where things haven't been done correctly. We need to make sure that there are fast and reliable diagnostics to allow those who are on the front line to make the correct decisions quickly without lengthy waits for test results to be returned from central laboratories. And of course, we need to increase awareness of sepsis, which the Honourable Gentleman is doing so well with his debate today. We need to make sure that medical professionals and the public are able to ask that question: could it be sepsis? I'm here speaking with a slightly croaky throat. So I'm fairly sure this time it isn't the strep B infection that triggered that septic shock in January 2017. But I can be confident because, unlike nearly 8 years ago, I'm all too aware of the signs and the symptoms of sepsis. That slurred speech or confusion, the extreme shivering or muscle pain, passing no urine for a day or more, severe breathlessness, and what's normally described as it feels like you're going to die. But having been there, actually it's almost more, it feels like you want to die. And the skin that's mottled or discoloured. I think if public as well as healthcare professionals across the system can be aware to look out for those 6 signs and to ask that question, could it be sepsis, then many, many more lives could be saved. And for people like Abby, who the Honourable Gentleman spoke so movingly about, like Lord McKinley, if that can be spotted earlier, we can make sure that those life-changing conditions can be spotted far sooner and dealt with.